Hi and welcome to the Ruby and Pearls knitting channel. My name's Leah and I'm coming to you from West Wales in the UK, where I live with my partner and our two dogs Ruby and Pearl. And I live about a mile away from the sea, so you often see some little clips of the ocean in my podcast. I'm not sure if I've got any to share with you today, but I do have two dogs with me today and one of them's just making an appearance now. I am filming a traditional standard format podcast episode today, and these dogs are supposed to be really sleepy, but it obviously hasn't happened quite that way. Yeah? Do you think I can film? Come on, Pearly. Okay, you good girl. You can find me as Leanne Knits on Ravelry and on Instagram. I'm not particularly active on Ravelry, but I'm very active on Instagram, so if you'd like to reach out and chat to me about my knitting, I would love to talk to you. I have got a standard format podcast today, as I said. I've got 2 finished objects and 3 works in progress, and 2 noisy dogs who hopefully will just settle down. So let's jump right in, shall we? The other thing I wanted to mention is that I have finally curated a list of what I would like to knit this autumn season. So I will be filming that video later today, because I'm still waiting for a parcel of some goodies to arrive, because I'd like to film it from stash yarn, and it will be brand new stash yarn, but you know. I had a birthday last week and I received some money and a gift voucher for Wool Warehouse, so I have spent that and I've got the yarn coming later today. So that's happening later today. I'm really trying to finish some other things off first before I actually jump into my autumn knitting plans. So let's talk about my first finished object, which is what I am wearing. And you might recognise this from last time. This is the Fidalgo cardigan by Michelle Frazzetta, also known as Misha Fraz Knits. She has a podcast called Not the Worsted Knitting Podcast, and she's very fun to watch. And more recently, I think, started designing. And I remember this pattern was just doing the rounds on Instagram. It was everywhere. And it is a top-down drop shoulder, as you can see there. Worsted weight, but DK works as well kind of pattern. She sort of says this in quite a relaxed manner in her podcast as well. And it is so fun to knit. I'm quite tempted to knit another one. It is knit in this broken 3x1 rib stitch, and on the back it has a really nice shoulder detail line. Tapered sleeves, as I said, top down so you can try it on. And what was really cool is that this button band is worked at the same time as the cardigan body, so you don't have to finish anything off at all. The buttonholes are done at the same time. You only need 1 needle size for the whole thing, which is also really fun. And Michelle instructs you to put stitch markers in where you're going to place the buttons, so that when you finish knitting, all you got to do is just sew on a button exactly where the marker was, which was really, really easy to follow. And I've decided to use these really cool, quite abstract looking buttons, so I'm really pleased with those. I used, oh God, can I remember the name of this yarn? Esteem DK by Woolcraft? Something like that. I have got one more ball somewhere. It was a very inexpensive yarn that I got from some local craft shop in like a sales bin by the door kind of thing. It is a cotton acrylic blend, and it's all 100% recycled. It was very inexpensive, and I really, really enjoyed working with this. It is pilling. Yeah, you can see that there. It is pilling a fair bit already. But I do find that recycled fibres often pill quite a bit. It kind of depends on the fibre. So you can either get recycled fibre that is mill ends, so basically bits and pieces that weren't used in the process of making a more stock yarn. And that shouldn't pill much because it's essentially the same thing as the stock yarn, but it's just sort of random bits and pieces put together. I believe this isn't that. It is more of a yarn that was made with reclaimed garments and plastic bottles, and for that reason it has more of a how do I put this? I am assuming that they take these garments and they've got to shred them somehow. So the staple length of the fibres is actually much, much shorter because of how it was reclaimed. I have a wandering dog. Can you sit down, please? Belly. Apologies if she's about to walk into the tripod. There is a possibility, but she wants a lot of attention right now. Okay, I think that's everything I have to say about the Fidalgo cardigan. Highly, highly recommend that you check this pattern out and that you give it a go. And the only minor complaint I have, and that is maybe a me problem. I do know that Maya from Maya Tink's podcast, she shares this as a sensory issue that she has. Apologies if the frame's just changed a little bit, but Pearl accidentally leant against the tripod. As I was saying, Maya from the Maya Tink's podcast, she shares that this is a bit of a sensory issue for her. So I know that I'm not completely on my own, but I also know that this is not a problem that everybody has. When you create the trapezoid on the back of a garment like this, you work rapid increases to create this shape. Because if you only increased every other row, you'd have more of a raglan kind of shape of increases. So by doing this rapid increasing, normally you would increase every single row. In this cardigan you don't, you actually do like a double increase on just the right side rows, which is interesting but doesn't really combat the problem that the shoulder line becomes really, really tight. And I'm going to take this off so that I can show you. But because you're making increases every row essentially, this bit here has got zero give to it, right? If you compare it to the rest of the fabric that has a lot of stretch, and this has got stretch in all directions, this line here has got practically no give. And it has even less give after blocking because I stretched the crap out of this. Because you can kind of feel it there, you can feel it pulling, and you can almost feel it pulling the sleeves upwards. And the other thing is this sleeve doesn't have any short rows in it, it's just straight knitted, which is a bit of a problem for me. I prefer, even in a really drop shoulder, that the sleeve has some short rows in it. And if you want to know more about this, I think actually Maya's latest podcast, she had a little sketch where she sort of explained to you that if you've got this line for the shoulder, but then you're doing a sleeve straight outwards like this, it's almost like there's a kink in there, and that is not the direction that your arm naturally takes. So unless I'm actually having my arm out here, my arm doesn't do that normally. My arm's more commonly, you know, to my side, which means there is even more stress on this increase line that is already quite taut. So that's just something to bear in mind. It is the beginning of September. It is a grey day today, but it is still fairly warm. So we'll see if I'm going to be able to keep this on all day. All episode. Probably all day because I'm going to go out later. My next finished object is something you haven't seen before, and is one of the reasons why I'm delaying my plans video a little bit. So it is a bit of a long story, but essentially I got asked to knit this commissioned piece for someone, and it is a shawl, a triangular shawl for a wedding. And I had a fairly short time span to knit this item. I had 4 weeks, but I didn't really want to deliver this item, you know, a few days before the wedding. I feel like that can cause a lot of stress for the person who's receiving it. I wanted them to have plenty of time to know, you know, I've got my outfit ready and I don't have to worry about whether this piece is actually going to materialise because a complete stranger is knitting it for them. So let me show you. I don't think I'm going to get this all in frame. I'm definitely not going to get this on. I'm going to take some pictures after and pop them in. As you can see, this is a very big shawl with a fringe and some tassels that I've attached. And I don't know if I can show you the full, yeah, you can kind of see the full depth there. This is yarn from my local yarn shop in a local blend of Welsh sheep wool. And it is dyed in this beautiful coppery, bronzy, yellowy shade. It has done a little bit of pooling there, but I think that's quite cool. And I knit this freehand based off of a photograph that I was shown. Basically, I was asked, could you recreate this picture with our yarn? And I started at the tip here because in the picture I could see, so this is all seed stitch. And as you can see, or as I could see in the picture, the stitches were leaning this way, so I knew it had to be knit sideways rather than like most traditional triangular shawls will be knit from the top down and increased out. And I could also not see an increased line in the centre, so that's how I knew it was knit sideways. And I decided to knit it from tip to tip and cut the yarn at the end of every other row. So you'd knit that way, you knit back, you cut yarn, you knit, knit, cut yarn, well, knit and purl obviously. And by doing that, you've already got the fringe there, it doesn't have to be applied afterwards, it's there. And all I did then was knot 6 strands together and brush them out so that they have this lovely floofy texture. And I'm really pleased with how this turned out. It is enormous, as you can see. I was aiming for full human wingspan because I think that's a good length. It is really cozy to wrap around you. It is absolutely not my colour. I knit this in Arrol weight on a 5.5. Is it a 5.5 or a 5? I think it was a 5.5mm needle because it's a rustic wool and I wanted it to have some drape, and I do think, let me see because it's blowing out a bit, the drape has turned out really, really nice. So I'm really, really pleased, and I knit this. It's 400 grams of Arrol weight yarn. I'm not 100% sure on the length of yarn that I used, but essentially I knit 2 full skeins and stopped right before I finished the second skein, and then with increases, and then I started decreasing. And I did that because I would rather not run out of yarn and have a little bit left at the end than have to dip into another skein. I did have more skeins available, but I didn't want to go just slightly into a new skein. So if you're ever doing anything that increases first and then decreases out, if you stop slightly before the midpoint of your yarn, you can pretty much guarantee that you're not going to run out, which has worked out really well for me. I had enough left to actually make these tassels, which were a bit of an afterthought, but I'm quite pleased with how they turned out. So yeah, very, very happy with this. If there is enough interest, I'd be quite happy to write up a free pattern for this because it's very basic. There's nothing that even requires testing essentially in this. It's just, yeah, it's just a nice cozy shawl. It felt a bit like a blanket when I was working on it, which was lovely. And yeah, it was quite nice to work on something in a colour and a yarn that I probably wouldn't choose for myself. Hi, editing Leah hopping on to say I forgot a finished object. Can you believe it? I don't know how this happened, but there's a whole finished object that I haven't discussed in this podcast I just filmed, and I literally just noticed it. And here it is. I'm not going to try it on because it's on a hanger and it's looking really beautiful on the hanger. But here it is. So I'm going to hang it up quickly behind me again and we'll chat about it briefly. So this is the Diamond Drift cardigan by MJ's Off the Hook Designs. And this is a cardigan that I cast on a very long time ago. Initially for a friend, and I am going to give this to my friend very soon when I see her. My friend really wanted a long cardigan, and it was a bit of a saga trying for me to find a long cardigan pattern that I actually wanted to complete. And I started this cardigan. This was probably the third thing that I actually started. And I made it in the petrol colour is Drops Charisma and the light blue is Drops Lima. I know one of them superwash, one isn't, but they actually worked really well together. And this is a crochet cardigan, worked from the bottom up. You do this beautiful colour work, and it was such a long time ago, I don't even remember how I made this colour work, but it's DK weight and I did it all on a 4mm hook, I believe. You work it all the way up, and then you seam the shoulders, and then you work the sleeves down. And the place where I started stalling was on the sleeves, because the sleeves are worked down and they're worked in the round, but not really. What you do is you crochet one round, you slip stitch into the first stitch of that round, and then you turn and you crochet back. So you're basically doing rows, but they get joined. And I ended up accidentally crocheting into the slip stitch and omitting a stitch at the end of the round instead. So my stitch count was fine, but the problem was there are some decreases here at the underarm, and they started spiraling around the sleeve because I kept offsetting the beginning of round. And at this point I was really over the project, and I just chucked it in a bag and shoved it away. And the other day, when I was thinking about my autumn knitting plans and what I would like to make, I went through my stash to find all my sweater quantities, and I, remembered obviously that I had this yarn. I thought, okay, I need to figure out what I'm going to do with this yarn because it really needs to come out of my stash. And then I realised how far I'd actually gotten in this project. And I thought, no, I'm going to try and finish this. And I did, and it didn't take very long at all. Once I figured out what the problem was with the spiralling sleeve, I ripped the sleeve back, I worked both sleeves, and then I did the button band, which is supposed to be done in crochet ribbing, which is basically through the back loop only single crochets in US terms. For some reason I work better in US terms when it comes to crochet. They just align better with how my brain works. And they are so tedious and so hard on my hands that I decided to knit the button band. So I actually held the drop sleemer double. Because crochet's got a much thicker fabric feel, I felt if I held it single this would be quite flimsy. So I picked stitches up all the way round, and I placed a marker around about here, sort of where, where your lower neck is. And then I worked back and forth to these markers, and then went further and did basically short rows and turned 4 stitches after each previous turns. I worked back and forth until my short rows reached here, the colour work, and that's when I then started working in complete rows, and that created this beautiful little bit of shawl collar. It is extremely cosy, it's really, really nice. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I cannot wait to give this to my friend when I see her next. So yeah, I can't believe that I completely forgot to talk about this in my podcast just now, so I had to quickly film this and insert it for you. But yeah, let's head back to the podcast now. Right, let's talk about works in progress. I'm going to start off with the beast, which you've seen a few times. And it is my Patagonia Peaks by Maya Déglon from Maya Tinks. I have spoken about this at length. I'm going to briefly recap what the pattern is, and then I'll show you how far I've gotten. So the pattern is an Aran weight quarter zip, but with press studs pattern. I will pop a picture in of the finished item as well, of Maya's finished item rather. And it is worked with the most clever construction you will have ever come across. You cast on here and you work this bit up with some decreases, and then you do some really, really clever shaping and shoulder seaming without a seam. It's all knitted. There's a video, there's some really good instructions by Maya, and it is a method that I've never used before. And then you finish that bit off by doing this folded collar with the contrast colour inside. Doing these facings was quite fiddly, I have to be honest. It is again a step-by-step instruction from Maya, so it is totally doable, but there was a lot of sort of faffing with it, if I'm totally honest. But I finished it and I'm pleased that it's done, and it looks extremely neat. I can show you there. And on the inside, the way she has instructed you to do this creates this really neat inside edge as well. So I'm really, really pleased with how this worked out. Once you've done this part, you work the rest of it down I'm going to have to hold it on this side, because if I hold it that side by the window, it just keeps blowing out. And I've already done the pocket flap as well, just need to do pocket lining. And you work the rest in this really cool colour work. And then you do the sleeves. And this has been a really fun project, but I fall in and out of love with it, and it's not the pattern. The pattern's really, really clever. The reason I fall in and out of love with it is because of my yarn choice. So I decided when I applied for this test knit, I should have mentioned this is a test knit. I decided that I wasn't going to buy any yarn, I was going to use stash. And I do like the colours, I'm really pleased with the colours I've picked. And I think I will really love the finished item. But Maya's sample was knit in a sport weight boucle held double. And I don't have that kind of yarn to hand. And if you imagine a boucle yarn is almost a little bit like a fuzzy yarn, like an alpaca or a mohair, in that it fills gaps out a bit more. So 2 strands of boucle sport will kind of technically be an Aran weight, but really it fills gaps more. So, you know, if you're using like a lace weight yarn that isn't fluffy, it's extremely thin, but if you're using a lace weight mohair, the fuzz of the mohair fills gaps and actually makes it possible for you to work that at a totally bigger gauge than you would normally with a standard lace weight. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, while this is technically an Aran weight pattern, because the yarn is Aran weight that Maya has used when she held the 2 strands together, the gauge is more like a 13-14 stitch, which to me is definitely not Aran, it's definitely chunky, and the yarn I'm using is chunky, and doing chunky weight yarn in colour work with a double thickness, and then on top of that, because it's quite a wide colour work repeat, I have to do ladder back jacquard so that my floats aren't super, super long. It's a lot, and it's hard on my hands, so I keep having to put it down. The yarns I'm using, the purpley blue is the shade Bluebell from Starcraft Special Chunky. The green is Signet Sugar Spun and Shapiest Scrumptious, a strand of each held together. The white is King Cole Paradise Beaches, 2 strands held together, and the grey is King Cole Subtle Drifter Chunky, 1 singular strand held on its own. So very scrappy, very innovative in using my stash. I'm really pleased about that. It's just, yeah, it's been a lot of work. And then last night I was just knitting away on my sleeve, getting a bit cocky, never looking at the chart, when I realised that each of these repeats, basically whenever you're changing how many stitches you're doing in, say, in green versus in grey within the chart, you change it and you work 3 rows like that, and then you change it again and work 3 rows like that. And for some reason I'd forgotten about that, because I've been putting this down, picking it up, and I only did 2 rows. And I did, I think I got onto even the next band of colour work when I suddenly looked at it and thought, these are very short peaks, and I realised that I basically stunted the peaks completely. So I am at this point just looking forward to finishing this item and washing it, and hopefully this colour work, which is very textural at the moment, will relax out. I have been really mindful to make sure my floats are decent. I know I'm knitting this in a mostly acrylic yarn, and people don't normally do that with colour work, so we will see how that turns out. But yeah, this is my Patagonia peaks, and I'm going to say it here, next episode you're going to see this finished, because if I don't say that, you're going to see it as a whip again, and I think we're all kind of at the point where we'd like to see it move on, because this has been quite a long-standing whip actually. The deadline isn't until October, so I do have some time to finish this, but you know, I've got 1.5 sleeves left to do, and I would really like for this not to sort of creep too far into my autumn knitting plans. My next whip is also one you have seen before, and it is the Arrol sweater by Petiteknit. I'll pop a picture in. And I'm knitting wine in Drops Cotton Light, which is a 50-50 cotton acrylic blend. and I've spoken about this before, this is a really dry cotton acrylic blend. Like the cotton hasn't really added any kind of elasticity or anything like that to the yarn. So it feels actually a bit more like a cotton linen blend to me. And for that reason, I am modifying the pattern ever so slightly. So as you can see, I've actually made loads of progress and I'm actually quite excited about this. Last time I think I'd finished one sleeve and I wasn't sure if I wanted to scrap the project, but I decided not to because I've cut yarn so many times in this and it would just not be usable for anything else. So I finished the second sleeve and I'm now on the body and I'm slowly plugging away at this because I'm just working on it when I need something plain and where I don't need to think about anything. I made some changes because this is going to be a transitional sort of late summer sweater for me, so I would like to finish this quite soon so I can wear it. I decided not to put any ribbing on it, but rather do some stockinette rolled edges. So in the sleeve, I just finished on this colour. I did a full stripe and then I think I did 5 rows in a much, or 5 rounds rather, in a much smaller needle size. I was using 4mm for the main fabric, so I think I went down to 3. And I just created this little rolled cuff. And then for the neckband, I thought about doing the full stripe, like the depth of stripe here, and then doing the rollover, but it would have been really high up. So I didn't do that. I can't even remember how many, but I did it all on the smaller needle size, so the whole of the collar. And I think it looks quite nice. When I tried it on, there was some kind of weird bunching in places, but I do think that is just because it's not blocked yet. If you're not familiar with the Aros sweater, it is a pattern by Petiteknit. It's worked top down with these contiguous saddle shoulders, and it's a very, very lovely stripy pattern. I've knit it before, it fits well, it's beautiful. I'm knitting mine in 3 colours, but I think her sample was more like 5 or 6 colours. And the row repeat is supposed to be 8 rounds or rows wide, but I accidentally did the first stripe as 10 rows, so I just went with it instead of ripping it back because I didn't notice until I was like coming to the end of stripe 2 and I just couldn't be bothered to rip it out. But I think it looks okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with this width of stripe. And I'm quite excited to finish this. I'm just gonna keep going on the body until I either like the length or run out of one of my colours. One of the two will happen first. And I'm also hoping to have this finished by next episode, so fingers crossed. And last currently active whip is the White Day cardigan by Maya Déglon from Maya Tinks, also a test knit. So I've got 2 test knits on the go at the moment, both for Maya. I can't resist a test knit for her because her patterns are so clever and just so well thought out. And I'll put a picture in here. So the first time she teased this was actually by creating the Nuit Blanche tee, which had the same kind of tuck detail, and I wasn't 100% certain on the tuck. And then she made this cardigan pattern, and again, not 100% certain on the tuck, therefore I'm going to leave the tuck out. I asked her, is that okay? And she said, absolutely. And the main reason I wanted to apply and knit this is because it is a saddle shoulder cardigan, and I've made a decent amount of progress. I should be sitting on that side, shouldn't I, and showing you like this because the lighting is better, but we're not going to do that now because we're coming to the end of the episode. So I am knitting mine in Yarn Smith's Pebble Haze in the shade Ludlamite, which is a own brand yarn from Wool Warehouse and a firm favourite of mine. And I've spoken about blown yarns before, all my issues I've had. And I actually had some issues with Yarn Smith's Pebble Haze DK. This is the Aran weight, and I much prefer this yarn to the DK. I found the DK to be quite a light DK and quite flimsy, whereas this Aran weight one has got much more substance to it. And yeah, I would like to show you some features of this pattern now. So I'm knitting mine on 4.5mm needles, I think. Let's check. I think, yes, 4.5. And the interesting thing about this saddle shoulder is that all the shaping actually happens in the saddle rather than in the rest of the body. So you start by working these saddles from this middle seam outwards, and then you shape the saddles with decreases, as you can see here. And then you pick up stitches for the front and back, and you don't do any short rows on those because the shaping has all already happened in the shoulder, which I thought was really clever and a bit different. And it was really, really fun to knit that part. I'm really enjoying this. I'm currently on the body in just the straight, boring, in inverted commas, bit. So I'm just slowly plugging away at this. There's a pretty long deadline on this, so I haven't got a mad rush to finish this. But this will go into my autumn knitting plan, so I'll also show it there, because I think I'm going to mostly try and focus on the other 2 whips and get those out the way, and then properly focus on this one, which means it's going to sort of run parallel to some of my autumn knitting plans. This yarn was gifted to me by my lovely friend Emily from Emily Knits. I have to mention her every podcast, don't I? If you don't watch her already, I highly recommend you hop on over there. She is very, very fun to watch. She's very natural. She's very relaxed and very much herself. Her podcast is cozy and like hanging out with a friend. I personally don't really enjoy podcasts that are overly polished, that are really like almost staged looking. I really like a podcast that's just someone sat down and started chatting about their knitting, which is kind of what I'm trying to emulate. So I don't really edit too many things out of my podcast. I will edit out coughs and too many movements from the dogs sometimes, but nothing major really. And Emily's the same, and she also has a doggy co-host, so highly recommend that you check her out. So yeah, she very kindly sent me this yarn for my birthday, and as you can see, it's a very me yarn, and as you will be able to see if you watch, or very me colour rather, if you end up watching my autumn knitting plans, you'll see a lot more of various shades of bluey green, because apparently that is all I want to knit in. Bluey green and a bit of neutral, like what I'm wearing today. So I think that is everything I have to talk about today. I really, really hope you enjoyed this episode, and please keep an eye out for my autumn knitting plans, because I'm extremely excited to share them with you. And if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, I would really, really appreciate a subscribe, a like, a comment, or a message on Instagram. It is all highly appreciated. And thank you so, so much for those of you who keep coming back and watching and commenting. I love sharing my knitting with you, and I hope to do this for a very long time. So thank you very much for being here. And if you have any questions, anything you want to talk about, just drop me a message. And I hope you have a lovely day, evening, afternoon, whatever you're up to, and I hope you got some knitting done while I was chatting away. I'd love to hear what you're knitting on right now, or what you were knitting on while you were watching me, so please leave me a comment down below, and I will chat to you very, very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.